Farmers today are facing rising costs, volatile markets, and extreme weather. The A Better Way to Farm podcast digs into strategies to help you take control of farm inputs and maximize profit so your farm can thrive for generations. Remember to take advantage of our free resources at abetterwaytofarm.com. Now, from America's Heartland, here's your host.
Today we're going to do the 12th day. We're going to talk about zinc. Going to our roles of the essential nutrients, it says that it aids in plant hormones and enzyme system. It is necessary for chlorophyll production. It's necessary for carbohydrate formation. It's necessary for starch formation. And it aids in seed formation. We don't want to be short in zinc. Looking at Mulder's ball, what are the three things it interacts with? Primarily phosphorus. We know that. We know that in the event that we don't have enough zinc, sometimes we over-apply phosphorus and it sort of kind of compensates for it, but that's not an effective way to do it. We know that it interacts with calcium, and we know that there's an interaction between zinc and iron as well. Some of those antagonistic type things that we see there between calcium, iron, and phosphorus can come back to bite us. And so we want to be aware of what we've got here. And this is probably the most commonly sold micronutrient. It's the one that gets the most press. A lot of the guys, we're using 1034, we're throwing in some zinc. We don't really know why, but we're throwing some in. Maybe it's not a bad idea, but I still come back to let's soil test and put on exactly what we need based on science, not based on throwing boards at a dart. But actually, when we soil test, we are actually pinpointing and getting what we want. We are no longer throwing darts at the board. Coming out of Life and Energy, looking at what Dr. Anderson has to say about zinc, he says, another case worth mentioning is that of zinc. It has become a highly recommended trace element by the experts and institutions. The response that follows the addition of this element is illusory. Zinc applications may cause a deceptive visual change in the desired crop, but zinc applications per se do not always improve the quality of the crop. The supposed zinc deficiency symptoms are oftentimes nitrogen deficiency caused by a phosphate deficiency. Nitrogen is an electrolyte, and so is zinc. Therefore, its application corrects the symptoms, but not the cause behind the cause. There are cases in very depleted soils, such as Western Australia, where zinc is truly deficient and needs to be added. He's talking about the fact here that sometimes we're using zinc to cure some of the other things that we do, although now here we are. It's interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine out in Nebraska one night here a couple weeks ago in his shop real late. We were sitting there and I was like, the same people that come to you and say, hey, Jeff, you are going to mine your soils, NPK, NPK, NPK. Got to put on a lot of P, got to put on a lot of K because you're going to mine your soils. They don't want to talk about zinc, manganese, iron, copper, boron. And we've been farming soils, we start out in Indiana, Illinois, probably 200 plus years, and at least 150. You get into Nebraska, 150 to 200 years. And would it make sense that if we could deplete P and K, we could deplete zinc and manganese and copper and iron and some of these other things? We don't know. That's why we soil test. But we want to make sure that we're not bleeding down those levels. Midwest, coming out of their book here, they have a pretty significant amount of things to say in regards to what we ought to be doing with zinc. And before we get into the zinc itself, I want to talk about the importance of applying micronutrients early. A high percent of the micronutrient requirements are taken up during the first third of the growing period. Therefore, it is important that these micronutrients be applied before or at planting. We're not wanting to wait on the deficiency to show up. We're wanting to take care of it like right now. And so this would be make the case for putting your micros in with your starter. They also say that zinc availability decreases as soil pH increases. At a pH of 5.0, the availability of zinc is high, and the availability decreases as it increases up to 9, where the zinc becomes completely unavailable to plants. Zinc deficiencies may be found on acidic, sandy soils, low in total zinc, or soils that are very high in phosphorus. Some organic soils and soils where the subsoils have been exposed to land leveling practices. In some areas, zinc deficiencies are also prevalent where? In cool, wet weather during the spring. Guys, it's never wrong to do the right thing. What do we know? We know that if our P1 is above 25 and or our P2 is above 50, we know there's a very high likelihood of a response to a pint or quart of zinc in the seed trench. What else do we know? We know that in those years when it's cool and wet, everything else is stressed. And that is an additional stressor. And having row-place phosphorus and row-place potassium and row-place zinc is going to help us come through that cold, wet spell that we're having right there. And so we highly recommend doing the right thing and putting it on. Again, they talk about what does it do? It's essential for the transformation of carbohydrates, the regulation of the consumption of sugar in the plant, and it forms a part of the enzyme systems that regulate plant growth. You're all looking for a plant growth regulator? Before we buy a plant growth regulator, let's build whatever we can. Proper zinc in that plant actually helps those enzyme systems. That is a plant growth regulator. Do the right thing. It will never come back and bite you. And we just want to keep doing the right thing over and over and over again. And using these micros is it. They're talking about what I'm going to give just a handful of the crops and what the deficiency looks like according to Midwest. Alfalfa, plants become stunted and show dieback. Sugar beets, recently matured leaves are light green with small pits developing between the veins and the upper leaf surfaces. Corn, light striping to overall whitening of the leaf along the leaf edge and the midrib. It will also stunt the growth with shorter internodes. And guys, zinc tends to favor white more than yellow. A lot of people talk about yellowing, but it really turns more to a white when you're deficient in it. In cotton, internodes become short and the plants have a bush appearance. Leaves become thick and brittle and may show bronzing or chlorosis. You small grain guys, you're looking for the tips and the margins of the older leaves to become grayish. The other leaf tissue will become a bronze green. And in soybeans, leaves are small with yellow and bronzing in between the veins. We don't want to see any of that. We want a tissue test. We want to do the right thing. We want to avoid these. We want to catch them as hidden hunger before they become a problem and make sure we're doing what we can to help prevent yield loss. You know, when we open that bag of seed or that Pro Box, there's about 700 some bushel yield potential. And basically everything we do after that point in time is we reduce. It's a yield reduction program. Our goal here is to reduce the yield reduction. And when we become more successful at that, we make more money. And that's what this is all about. Coming out of the fertilizer handbook, available occasionally on Amazon, start looking. Again, it says that the availability of zinc decreases with increasing soil pH. Climatic factors include affecting zinc responses are temperature and moisture, and zinc deficiencies are most severe in the spring on cold, wet soils, and especially if they're marginal in zinc. Crops susceptible to your zinc deficiency: corn, beans, cotton, flax, many fruit and nut crops. Some varieties of these crops are more susceptible than others, and zinc deficient plants will mature later than other normal plants. Guys, you want to speed up maturity? What do we want to do? We want to make sure we have every nutrient right. That's how we're going to get the maturity to speed up. That's how we're going to avoid getting bit by the frost man as he comes in the fall. We know that phosphorus levels of high levels of phosphorus may induce a zinc deficiency on low zinc soils. We've seen high phosphorus levels induce deficiencies on high zinc soils. That's why we make the recommendation that if your P1 is above 25 and or your P2 is above 50, we're going to add a pint of zinc into that. They go on in here in the fertilizer handbook to say that a banned application may result in a more efficient uptake of the micronutrients, which have a tendency to react with the soil and soon become less available to the plants. These guys are really big on banning what it is that you're putting in there. And they're very, very fond of foliar. There's another spot in here where it talks about that the foliar spray application should be made early in the morning or late in the afternoon. They know how to foliar feed. We're not doing it in the heat of the day. We're doing it when it's cool. And we're going to take care of that plant and let that plant take care of us. The Western Handbook, just retouching on the deficiency signs, is the only thing I'm going to look at in here. We do know that it is linked with iron and manganese in the formation of chlorophyll. So we need all of the above for that. We know that terminal leaves are abnormally small. And we know that fruit bud formation is severely reduced, and some of the plants will have necrosis or dead areas. Again, not anything that we want to see, and we definitely don't want to let it get to that stage where it's a visual deficiency. Coming out of the soil up, he says, we have set the level of zinc at 6 parts per million to 8 parts per million. 6 will normally be adequate. And he also said that it's best to add it to a starter band or apply it as a foliar. Note, and pay attention to this, please, guys. You may never do anything with this, but we want to make sure we make your life better, not worse. Never, and that's in big, bold letters, never add a sulfonated product such as a zinc sulfate to a liquid phosphate. You will end up with a gravel-like precipitate. Guys, 500-gallon of goo is never a good thing. Another method of supplying zinc is to add it to the starter fertilizer. Banding concentrates a material, requiring less to do the job. He goes on to say that we would not want to use an oxide because the oxide form would not become available until about the time of harvest. If you use the zinc oxide, its availability will be fairly decent in late September. That's going to be too late. We don't want to do that. He recommends 1 to 2 quarts of an 8 to 10% zinc chelate banded in the starter, which will manage most of your needs. I'm not going to make that broad recommendation. I want to see the soil test. I've been working through soil tests today with Cassie and some of her guys and some different things in here. And guys, we're making recommendations down to the ounce. This day and age, we don't want to put on anything we don't have to. We want to save every dime that we can, but we want to get every dollar back that we can get back. Another method of supplying zinc is through the foliar application. Foliar application uses liquid forms, especially designed for this type of application. And this is an excellent method. Guys, these products we're talking about are built to be foliar fed. But we still need some in the seed trench because we don't want to be deficient up front. Neil says, consider this. What happens if nitrogen is oversupplied? First of all, too much nitrogen can induce a zinc deficiency. Zinc is instrumental in moisture absorption, therefore it takes more water to do the same job, say, in corn production. Here we go again. We want to have good water usage. Get the right amount of potassium in the plant. Not too much and not the wrong form. We want to have good water utilization. Don't use too much nitrogen. Why? Because that makes a zinc deficiency. When we have a zinc deficiency, we don't use our water right. We also know, again, hit this one more time, that too much nitrogen ties up the copper. Copper gives strength to the stalk. He goes on back in here talking about that zinc is probably the most universally helpful of all the micronutrients audited via soil test. When it is short, it adversely affects moisture absorption in the crop. Guys, it is never wrong to do the right thing. Figure out how life works and get on the right side of it. That's what we're after. That's what we're always after, doing the right thing. Deficiencies, again, in corn and sorghum, you're going to get intervenal chlorosis. You're going to get shortened internodes and crinkled leaves. In soybeans and the dry edibles, you're going to get intervenal chlorosis. In rice, you're going to get leaf lesions. You're going to get leaf bronzing and shortened internodes. We don't want to see any of those things ever. And so we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing and preventing that. Guys, again, micronutrients respond best when the calcium is in that 60 to 70% base saturation range and magnesium is 10 to 20. And so we want to keep that in mind as we're looking through here. And if we're not in that situation, we want to be taking corrective steps to that as best that we can. Zinc adds in the absorption of moisture along with potassium. Think of zinc as a critical moisture situation. It also helps transform carbohydrates. It regulates plant sugar use. It plays a role in the enzyme system functioning as well as growth regulators normally present in the plant and protein synthesis. There are plant growth regulators that occur naturally, and zinc helps to regulate those to make them work right. Consider zinc needs, especially in sensitive crops such as corn and grain sorghum and soybeans and dry beans. Guys, I think my favorite quote out of everything that I've read comes from Dr. Anderson. And I'm just going to wrap this up for today and close here. But I want to go back to something that I read earlier. If you have a rust spot on your car that has come through from the underneath, does it correct the rust problem to say that there is just a paint deficiency? And does it correct the rust problem to paint over the spot? That's not what we want to do. It's what we do a lot in ag, but it's not what we want to do. When I get a rust spot on a pickup, it needs to be cut out and a new piece welded in. We don't just paint over it and think that we've done something. Okay? Guys, farming is a wonderful business. I'm super excited and blessed to be a part of this industry. I feel honored that we get to talk to you guys and be a little bitty part of your life. Thank you for those of you who have reached out. We will look forward to talking to you guys more. Always feel free to reach out. We love to talk to you. If there's anything that we can do, we would really like to do that. And we are continuously seeking to do better. We appreciate you guys. Thank you for tuning in.